we will get through this.
Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue. Those of you who see this program every week, every Sunday know that we discuss range of issues on environment and climate change in this program. And today we are going to a special day itself, because today we are going to have our 25th episode. We have started almost more than 6 months back, and today we are going to have our 25th episode. And today's episode is also special in the sense we are going to discuss about a problem which has been haunting South Asia for more than last 3 decades, arsenic. We call today's program, Arsenic is the Curse Getting Bigger? Why I'm saying so, why the title is like this, I'm going to explain sometime from now. But let me share with you that this program is brought on by the Climate TV channel Canada in collaboration with the Prudence Media channel India, and also the No TV Bangla, a YouTube channel from Bangladesh having more than 80,000 subscribers. Without doubt, any further ado, let me introduce a very, very eminent panel that I have with me to discuss today's issue. I have with me Alan Fryar, Professor of Earth and Environment Science in the University of Kentucky, and he has worked extensively on this agenda, both in the Ganga Basin and also the Mekong Basin, and it's really, I'm looking forward to see and looking forward to hear from him about the issue in South Asia in general and Ganga and Mekong in particular. Welcome, Professor Fryar, to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have with me my very good friend, Professor Abhijit Mukherjee. Abhijit is the Associate Professor in School of Environmental Science and Engineering, a major frontline researcher and scientist in the groundwater and related issues in India right now, Abhijit. And I think Abhijit's paper on artificial intelligence regarding arsenic has actually triggered today's program. Welcome, Abhijit, to the show.
Thank you.
I have with me Ashok Ghosh, Dr. Ashok Ghosh. He's the chairman of the Bihar State Pollution Control Board, but that is only one part of his identity. He's an avid researcher and working on these issues and having been part of various Government of India and other committees. Welcome, Dr. Ghosh, to the show. It's absolutely having you. I have with me, I think Abida has joined. I have with me Abida Farooqi. Abida is the associate professor in the Environment Science Department of Quaid-i Azam University, Islamabad, Pakistan. Welcome, Abida, to the show. And I have also with me Dr. Debapriya Mondal. Dr. Mondal is a lecturer in global health, St. John's University of London. And it's fascinating because we also need to know the health component of arsenic. And welcome, Dr. Mondal, to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. And I last but not the least, is very, very important, I have with me Dr. Anwar Zahid. Dr. Zahid is the Director, Groundwater, Hydrology, and Bangladesh Water Development Board. And Bangladesh and India, at least the West Bengal part of India, are the areas which are being most affected by arsenic. Welcome, Dr. Zahid, to the program.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation.
Absolute pleasure to have all of you. Before I go to Abhijit for triggering it, let me share with you that arsenic is an agenda, as I was talking about. It was kind of from the early 80s, 1983 to be precise, when first the arsenic problem was unearthed in a way. And then it was mainly in the West Bengal part of India. Gradually also the Bangladesh was found to be affected by arsenic contamination in groundwater. And subsequently other parts of India like Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, they were also being found to be affected. and other parts of South Asia. I think in Pakistan, that there are two zones at least, Punjab and Sindh, if I'm not wrong. These are areas where kind of we are having problem with arsenic. Now, we all know that. But the latest finding of Abhijit, I think Abhijit will be detailing on that. The latest paper of Abhijit says, I think in Indian context, through the artificial intelligence method, Abhijit's and his team's finding says that 20% of the land area in India, the groundwater under that being affected with arsenic. And 250 million people, 250 million people, much, much more than the population of many, many countries are exposed to the threat. So that's a big, big situation. So let's start from that and then we'll try to go to the other parts. Let's start with Abhijit. Abhijit, what's the reality right now? What's your finding?
Jayanta, so I have been working on the arsenic crisis in South Asia for almost last 20 years now. And together with many of the panelists here, we have been doing extensive studies in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, and other countries. So this study that we are talking today, it's one of the more recent studies that we have done, working with the government of India, like the Ministry of Jal Shakti, working with the Jal Jeevan Mission database that government of India hosts, which is about 27 lakh data points, 2.7 million measurements that government of India has. So we have applied machine learning techniques to recognize the patterns. And doing so, we have been able to detect areas which are exposed to arsenic in drinking water, mostly in the drinking water.
Okay.
And the paper talks about the distribution of the arsenic not only in West Bengal or associated states, but all across the country. And it shows out some very distinct patterns that which were not known earlier. We had some sporadic information from here and there, but our work showed very distinctively that there are some very specific zones across India, and that would also kind of extend to our neighboring countries like Bangladesh. We have another paper, transboundary Ganges Delta with Bangladesh. On a kind of a conservative estimate, who would be exposed drinking arsenic-laden water as of today.
And you are saying that it's pan across the country, not really much bigger area than what we thought earlier.
Yes. So, so if I have to give more precise locations, so we have arsenic pollution in the Ganges Delta or Ganges Basin, from eastern UP to West Bengal. Then in the Brahmaputra Basin, most of Assam, much of Meghalaya and Nagaland and the surrounding areas, Arunachal Pradesh. And in the west, we have Punjab, parts of Punjab, and that goes to Pakistan also, transboundary. And then if you come to the rest of India, there are some parts of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh in the Narmada Basin where you have some pollution. And then in Chhattisgarh, which is more of a volcanic source. And then down south, close to the gold mines of Hatti and Kolar.
Okay, so it's quite a wide area being kind of thought to be affected. So I'll be coming to you for the further on that, but let me, before I go to Professor Fryar for an overview of South Asia, as because the Indian situation being raised, let me go to Dr. Ghosh, who is also the chairman of Bihar Pollution Control Board. Dr. Ghosh, what is the situation? See, the scientists like Abhijit are kind of giving data. What's the ground level situation, say in the state of Bihar and erstwhile Bihar, the part now of the Jharkhand? What is the situation out in that Gangetic plain?
Actually, when I started working on arsenic issues in groundwater of Bihar, way back in 2003-4, nobody believed that arsenic exists in the groundwater of Bihar. And when early publications were there, even government was not ready to accept the reports that arsenic exists. But as of today, it is a well-known problem as far as groundwater of Bihar is concerned. And in India, after Assam and Bengal, Bihar is the third state that is supposed to be highly affected by arsenic contamination in groundwater. And Bihar has 38 districts. Out of that, 18 districts have high level of arsenic in groundwater. That is more than WHO limit of 10 microgram per liter. And you will be amazed to know that in
bigger than we assumed it to be. But also it's a fact, from 80s onwards, a lot of money has been pumped in to counter the arsenic problem. As an scientist and as well as an executive, what do you think, that has that money been utilized well to counter the arsenic? Do we have a kind of a long-term plan, or we are just doing the ad hocism out there? What's your personal contention?
My blunt answer will be no. Money has been spent, lots of money has been spent. But unfortunately, due to wrong planning and lack of proper operation and maintenance mechanism, and lack of community participation, the structures that are put in the field, that they become be defunct in very short time. So from one side, you go on putting money in new structures, and old structures are getting defunct. And that is why in many areas where I had worked in way back in 2004 and 5, even today, people in that area, they are drinking the same old contaminated water. So it is not there that money has not been spent. It has been spent, but it's not properly spent. Although I'm a part of government now, but still I'm very, critical about the way the money is being spent and the way the mitigation is being planned.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your opinion, because that's always being asked, that with so much money being pumped in, why we can't have a solution. I'll be coming back to you, but I'll come to you, but let me go to Professor Fryar. Professor Fryar, you have heard about the Indian scenario, the study by the Professor Mukherjee and his team, and also Dr. Ghosh's point of view. Overall in South Asia, we will be talking to Pakistan, we'll be talking to Bangladesh experts, but overall in South Asia, how you see the problem? How big is the arsenic problem still now?
I would defer to some extent to my colleagues who are closer to the situation on the ground as part of this panel and their collaborators, but I think it's still not fully appreciated. I would go back to the paper that you mentioned that Abhijit Mukherjee and his group just published. The numbers there are perhaps a factor of 5 higher than the numbers that we've been talking about previously, because we've been focusing primarily on the Ganges Basin. And I think that, as Abhijit said, there is a recognition among local communities, perhaps, of the local scale of the problem, but until recently, not a full national or transboundary scale recognition. And I think part of it is simply because there has not been the effort to develop a subcontinental scale picture that integrates the various local scale detections and kind of removes the political boundaries and simply focuses on the geologic commonalities in terms of, for example, where the river basins are, that the most pronounced contamination is associated with the aquifers and the basins of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra and the Indus.
Okay. I'll be coming back to you. I have a query that of late, maybe since 2010, we may not be talking about arsenic contamination a lot. The issue seems to have gone a bit of a back burner. Has the issue been resolved, or we are kind of consciously talking the other agenda? I really don't know. Would like to know from this very eminent panel, but let me first go quickly hear the situation in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and then I'll come to Professor Mondal to know the health part of it. First to Mr. Zahid. Dr. Zahid, what is the situation in Bangladesh?
Oh, okay, thank you. So you know that in late 90s, 1998, 99, Department of Public Health Engineering, they conveyed a detailed national survey, and they have found that 42% of our shallow tube wells, tested tube wells, were arsenic more than 10.
42% in the entire country?
Within the country. And
so that's why, sorry to interrupt you, it is saying that largest mass poisoning in history. If you go to the internet, Bangladesh arsenic pollution is being talked about as the largest mass poisoning in history. Sorry, please continue. It's very important.
Because out of our 64 districts, shallow groundwater of 61 districts are more or less contaminated by arsenic. And you know that our floodplain and deltaic areas are highly contaminated. And you have mentioned rightly that maybe after 2010, we did not think much on the spreading of arsenic contamination. Rather, after enactation of our arsenic mitigation policy in 2004, the government was focused on to supply alternate source of fresh.
I'll be coming to that. Dr. Zahid, what the government is planning to do or is doing.
Okay, and if you consider the present situation now, in 2018, we published a paper with the collaboration of UCL, UK, and World Bank, and we prepared the risk map regarding arsenic, salinity, and depletion of water table. And if we consider arsenic, that still about 64 million people are exposed to arsenic contamination if we consider the WHO
64
guidelines.
Million people.
People are exposed. But
Potentially.
But the government is providing the alternate sources.
I'm coming to the alternative. Let me, Abida, you have to unmute yourself, and you keep unmuted both video and audio. Abida, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fine, great. What is the situation in Pakistan? I think in Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh are the areas where the arsenic problems are mainly being found. What's the situation out there?
Yes, thank you, Basu. You are right. In Pakistan, the most affected provinces, we have two provinces which are most affected, that is Sindh and Punjab. Actually, the problem, like in Bangladesh and in India, in Pakistan, the problem started in late 90s. It was in 2000 when we have the first incident. And after that, then PCRWR, Pakistan Council for Research in Water Resources, with the help of UNICEF, they started some testing of wells for the arsenic. And in 2004, it was declared that Sindh and Punjab are the most contaminated provinces in the country. They tested throughout the country. We have two other more provinces, but the situation is less in those provinces. I must say that in Pakistan, arsenic contamination is a big problem, but it's less worse than as compared to India and Bangladesh. Okay. And maybe the reason is we have not tested too much. In India and Bangladesh, there is a massive testing.
I think that's very interesting. Yes. That's very interesting. Yeah. And also, I think whatever the little background study I have done, I've seen that unlike India and Bangladesh, in your case, the anthropogenic cause of pollution is much more. your industries are, your lead smelters and other industries are putting up arsenic in the groundwater. That's what I have found. I've come to the for that. But let me go to Debapriya. Debapriya, I think it's fascinating what we have heard from the entire span of South Asia. But what the health implication? We know the obvious implications, but through the water, through the food, what is the current level of research saying about the health contamination in general and South Asia in particular? Debapriya.
So what I will say, Jayanta, over here is that we know that arsenic can cause any type of health implication. So it is not only a carcinogen, but it can cause many, many other health. Adverse health outcomes, which includes cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, adverse reproductive health outcomes, and even it can impact the infants for developmental outcomes. I want to put some figures in perspective. So one of it is like, recently there was a news fed where, say, a civil society group in India called Inner Voice Foundations, they reported that in last 25 years, 10 lakh, so 1 million people have died from diseases caused due to arsenic. And to bring you in perspective, I think it is very common to say, like, what is the death caused by COVID?
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think that these figures are official figures or these are reliable figures? This 1 million is a huge, huge figure. So what's your personal perception?
It is true, because it is over the span of 25 years that they have said that there could be such deaths. But at the same time, I can also tell you that based on our risk estimations, like when we estimated the cancer risks, we found there is a potential of 6 per 10,000 developing a cancer due to lifetime exposure of arsenic.
6 per 10,000. 6 per 10,000. So that's
people,
again a big figure.
Yes, 6 per 10,000. So this is based on the study we recently did in Bihar. So 6 per 10,000 can develop cancer. This is just cancer. I'm not talking about CVD or anything else. So can develop a cancer due to the exposure to arsenic from food and drinking water. I might just put one prospective data on it. So Abhijit mentioned about 250 million people who might be exposed to arsenic above the WHO guideline of 10. So if we consider that a normal prevalence of arsenicosis, so which is the skin manifestations we talk about, the skin problems, which is around 15% of exposed population. We have normally seen it in various studies. That takes us to 37 million people being exposed to arsenicosis based on this 250 million. And to bring you to perspective, so we talk about in India is a country where cardiovascular diseases is the main environmental cost problem.
I think that's sorry to stop you here, because this I need to discuss, I think, specifically. So I'll come back to you with this, but before I let go Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh, I really am kind of pushed to ask this question to you, because Debapriya has just mentioned about the cancer part of it, that 6 out of kind of 10,000 6 out of 1,000. 6 out of 1,000.
6 out of 10,000. So
6 out of 10,000.
10,000 might develop cancer.
I know you are also an expert of cancer. You work in that area. What's your perception? How we are going about it?
Actually, we have worked together, Debapriya and myself, on one Indo-UK project jointly that terminated in the month of December, completed in the month of December last year. And that we studied impact of food also on arsenic-induced Quaid-i. And her estimate is right. We know about that. And day by day, the number of cancer patients with the visible arsenosis symptoms like keratosis is increasing. We are taking a track now. Earlier, there was no tracking because very few patients were coming to the cancer hospital with, and nobody knew that there's correlation between arsenic and cancer. But since last 5-6 years, we are monitoring with different types of cancer cases coming to our hospital. And we have found this number that I support Debapriya on this number. and this may be higher also.
Maybe
Because
higher.
all the cases are not reported, and all the cases, many cases in the rural area due to poverty, they can't go to even hospital for treatment.
Okay, let me ask you a straight question. You are also part of the Minister of Environment and Forest and Climate Change various committees and expert in yours itself. Does the government, not only I think I'm talking about Union government or Bihar government, cutting across the country, various governments, do they give arsenic the due cognizance and importance? What do you feel? What's your personal understanding?
My perception is there. Government is serious about this problem.
Okay.
No doubt about that. And money is also being flowing. But somehow it is mismanaged.
Somehow it's mismanaged.
It has to need for streamlining the mitigation policy. And it cannot be generic. Generic solution is not possible for arsenic mitigation.
Okay.
It has to be area specific. And then only it will succeed. And there's also need for community participation in all the mitigation strategies to succeed.
So the planning has to be blended. The planning has to be blended.
Yeah. Government is serious.
Planning has to be blended.
Planning is there. And unfortunately, in India, what happens that most of the planners, they're not aware with the real problem. The policymakers are, politicians. And
great. I think you have started the harness bar. Let's go to Abhijit.
I always speak that. I feel that, and I'm very sorry to say about these things, because I see the sufferings, and despite money being spent, if the things are like that, I never feel good. And I always I give suggestions to government. Many suggestions have been implemented, not implemented, but I keep hammering, and things are looking up. I'm positive that in coming time, more scientific solution will be adopted. I have given some advice also to Bihar government. And
absolutely. Thanks for your very, I think, very important opinion. Abhijit, you as a scientist being flagging off these figures of 250 millions or otherwise, you are working with the entire India and you are also working with Bangladesh, I understand. Let's concentrate on India. What your latest paper is saying about the prospective part of it? What can be? But what is the situation? And as Dr. Ghosh been pointing out, that the implementation part of it, planning part of it. What's your take on that, Abhijit?
So from my experience, and I have been also in the advisor to the Public Health Engineering Government of West Bengal. Some of my students were engineers. We investigated what is going wrong, and we found the technology is in place. And I think the government has a plan to do things. Where it failed is the socio-economic, like the downstream maintenance. So, if the government cannot do everything, like as Professor Ghosh said, like we need to have community participations. And in many of these locations, what we found, the plant is in place and the chemicals are in place, but the person who is going to run the plant is not educated enough, or he's not.
But Abhijit, that's also the responsibility of the government, not necessarily the union government, but the state government. I have always found, even in Ganga case, there is the harmony between the state and union government may be missing. Maybe the same case out here.
Yes and no. Well, yes, the reason and no, because what I understand, and again, I'm not a legal person. As of the present land rule, like if somebody gives their land to construct a plant, the government is bound to give, one of the household members the job to be the operator, or being a staff of that plant. So that person may or may not be skilled. Most of the times they are not skilled, and since they have given a plot, they are kind of entitled for the job. So they are not even interested in getting trained, because it's a job that is fixed. So they don't have a fear to lose the job. So they don't care actually.
That's amazing, Abhijit. Let me go to Professor Fryar. Professor Fryar, it's amazing that when in one side, Debapriya has just mentioned that the kind of people, kind of population being affected and the cancer and everything. And the other side, as Abhijit has been very rightly pointing out, is small nitty-gritty that you have to give a job to somebody who is untrained and you keep on keeping him because he or she has to. And is being affecting millions. So as an expert from outside, having a bird's eye view, what do you feel? What should be done about it, Professor Fryar?
Well, I think part of the challenge, and again, my colleagues in Bangladesh and Pakistan, as well as India, perhaps can speak to the broader situation, is that there is both community water supply of the sort that Abhijit is talking about, and with which I am more familiar, but also the household water supply with the tube wells, perhaps with hand pumps. And so the strategy for arsenic mitigation is perhaps not the same vis-a-vis these smallholder tube wells, for example, like in Bangladesh, where there was the effort to mark safe versus unsafe tube wells, relative to the larger sort of community water supply structures of the sort that Abhijit is talking about. And I honestly can't speak to the relative proportions of each, but I do know that there is a difference between the two. And so you face the challenges not only of making sure that you have adequately trained, ideally, technical staff, but also that the community is aware of where their water is coming from and perhaps the need for additional point of treatment solutions.
Professor Fryar, you have worked both in Mekong Basin and also the Ganges Basin. Right. Any difference out there? You are talking about community. You have also mentioned community in your earlier kind of talk. And what is the situation in Mekong and Ganga? Are the same problems both sides, or Mekong is better or Ganga is better? What is your take?
It's rather different. I think part of the situation is similar in terms of the underlying causes of the arsenic, in terms of the geology. But with the Mekong Basin, like with other basins besides the Ganga in South and East Asia, the problem was not appreciated as early as it was in West Bengal and Bangladesh. Okay. And so the scientific studies that came out somewhat later in the 2000s, in the first decade of the 2000s, than the work that was done in West Bengal and in Bangladesh in particular. I think there has been some benefiting in Cambodia and Vietnam in particular from the work that was done in India and Bangladesh in terms of understanding the scope and the potential causes of the problem.
Okay, great. On that take, let me go to Bangladesh, because Bangladesh and West Bengal are contiguous, and I think the same problem runs from one country to another. Dr. Zahid, you were talking about the implementation part of it. You mentioned that how big the problem is in Bangladesh. Now, what the government is doing or planning to do or has done so far on this agenda? Dr. Zahid.
Okay. So after enactation of the arsenic mitigation policy and implementation plan in 2004, the government started to provide alternate, safe and fresh drinking water. And the Department of Public Health Engineering is leading that part. So initially, the government provided some short-term options like consent filter, rainwater harvesting, this type of options, dug wells. But these short-term options did not work well. Even the household level filters did not work well. So regarding the long-term option, installation of deep tube well, that works good, and still the Department of Public Health Engineering is providing deep tube wells in different parts. Single wells, as well as they are installing production tube well for the community level water supply. You know that the rural population are affected much, and in the rural part we did not have the community water supply system, but DPHE and different NGOs, they have already started to install the production tube well and the
Is it working? Is it working? Is it working so far?
Yeah. Where the demand is high, it is working very well.
Okay.
And you know that sometimes maybe there is already a source of fresh water, but due to political influences, Department of Public Health, even NGOs, they were bound to install production water supply network. So as there is not much demand, so those type of setup did not work well. But where there is demand, still working well. And
It's
also
working well.
some sorts of other options like iron arsenic removal plant for maybe household level water supply, and the community, as demand is high, so the community is also working to maintain those technologies.
Okay, okay. And any data on the health situation in Bangladesh affected by arsenic?
Actually, since few years, yes, people are somehow getting alternate fresh and safe water supply. So the health aspect is not so much deteriorated.
Not deteriorated. Okay, maybe the data is also there. Maybe as Debapriya pointed out, maybe the data is not there. Perhaps you never know.
Yeah, we have the Directorate of Health.
The data is also an issue. Okay.
But we have also other sorts of problems, and government. Okay, still government. What I said, that the government itself admit that still 13 to 14% of our population is not getting adequate, safe, and fresh.
That's very important. Let us stop here. Come back to you. The 30 to 40% is not getting safe water. That's
13 to 14. As per
30 to
government.
40. 30 to 40. Fine. Let's quickly see what going in Pakistan. Abida, you keep unmuted. Abida, don't need to mute yourself. Abida, what's the situation? As I was pointing out that in Punjab and Sindh there are a lot of anthropogenic pollution. So what is the situation? What the government doing now?
Basu, first of all, I want to correct you. Actually, this anthropogenic pollution, when the studies started very early in 20s, it was concluded that these are the anthropogenic, this is anthropogenic, but actually this is not anthropogenic. This is like now if you see some papers, some published papers, these show that this contamination is geogenic. There are some effect by the anthropogenic, but majorly it is geogenic. And about the initiatives for the remediation in Pakistan, actually, what I will say, the problem was not understood till like 2010 or that. But after a lot of efforts by the researchers, now recently I have visited Lahore. Lahore is the most affected city in Punjab.
So some effort from the government. So there are some efforts from the government.
Yes, I have visited Lahore recently. So there is Wasa.
But it need to be pushed up. It need to be pushed up.
So they are basically providing some filtration plants which are equipped with arsenic removal too.
Okay, some plant they have been providing. Let's go to Debapriya here. How bad is the situation overall, Debapriya? You mentioned about the cancer and all this, but what are the overall? How big is the situation, Debapriya?
So when I was just trying to give you some perspective in terms of the cases, and I just was stopped by saying that, okay, if we consider 250 million being exposed and similar situations in Bangladesh, so it brings us to 37 million people that might have some kind of skin manifestation, and which is a hallmark of toxicity, means there will be other health implications due to it. But if you look into perspective, comparing it to other diseases where India is mostly concerned, like where WHO is concerned and Indian health systems are concerned, for example, CVD, in 2016, we had got around 55 million cases. So if you talk about COVID, so how many deaths have happened? 0.1 million till death. Till date is 0.1 million, and then we take into those perspectives, then why is arsenic in the, as you has termed, back burner? Why it has gone back? Why it is not into focus? Or why are we not worried about the health of the people? One of the important answer to this is we if you can see all of us speaking today, you might have a feeling that we are all working in silos. So the researcher, the health institutes, the government, the people who are exposed, we are all in our different blocks. We are trying to solve these problems within our silos. And that's why the problem is still there, in spite of good technology, in spite of good data, in spite of knowing where the problem is, in spite of everything. This is the major problem. So we need to revamp it. We need to think that the new contemporary research, which we call design thinking, where we start the research including the participants, so the inclusivity. So we have to include the end users, we have to include the participants, we have to include government and these other stakeholders when we conceive the research. To solve this problem, we have to do this as a way forward.
A very important point. Just a quick question to you in this context. Do you think, because the arsenic problem, as I understand, manifests over a period of time. It's not right like that immediately.
Yeah, it's not like
COVID.
diarrhea.
It's not COVID that immediately you have a fever or something. So it kind of manifests over a long period of time after a long-term exposure. So do you think that the health data is underrated in South Asia, to be particular? Because as you said very rightly, we have air pollution problem, we have other issues where much more bigger numbers are there. So India is a country of 130 crores, so 1,300 millions. So do you think that that's the reason that it is being, the figure being actually being, the actual data is actually much less, what we are getting actually should be much higher? What's your take?
So you might be aware by now that we don't have appropriate record to report arsenicosis in health centers. So if you go to a local village health center, there is no trained person to understand how to record an arsenicosis case. That has been always there. It's not a new thing. It is only in big hospitals when, like as Ashok mentioned, when people go with symptoms and they have cancer already developed, then people look into and say, oh, it might be caused by arsenic because he is coming from Buxar, which is known to be contaminated. But just on that, the people themselves are not aware. So the villagers, in spite of 20 years of being working and of us going to the field, I just give a very quick example. When we went to the field to do the surveys in Bihar.
I get your point that the people are not being kind of concerned themselves, but unfortunately, in the country like India, I think government has the main role. And when we are talking that community is not coming up, I think it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that communities handle it. It's not the other way around.
Responsibility
government has to be much more
us.
proactive. Yeah. It has to handhold the government in a much stronger manner. You just cannot leave them, oh, these guys are unaware, so let them do what they are facing. It can't be like this. You have to handhold the people, these poor people, affected people, to ensure that they are much less affected. Dr. Fryar, I think we have about 15 minutes time. Let's. I think what a point being raised by Professor Mondal is that everybody is kind of working maybe in isolation. May not be this group. You may be working together. It's general. Do you think that in South Asia? So when we are talking about India's problem, I'll come to Abhijit on that as well. West Bengal and the contiguous Bangladesh are being affected together. In the Punjab and then the Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh being affected. Do you see the scope and opportunity to work together at the regional level, Dr. Fryar?
I do. If I may step back for just a moment too, and perhaps Professor Mondal can speak to this, in terms of the magnitude of the problem across the region, not just in any particular country, I think there may be some underappreciation too in terms of comorbidities, that just because you may not be primarily suffering from arsenic-induced cancers doesn't mean that exposure to arsenic may not have a health impact that reinforces some other sort of health issue that you already have. But because I'm not a health expert, I can't speak to that exactly. I will say, I think that one of the benefits of having researchers from outside the subcontinent involved is that it has facilitated collaboration, not just in a bilateral sense, like between the UK and India or Pakistan, or between USA and India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, but also facilitated cross-border collaborations between the countries in the subcontinent.
Absolutely, I think very important, very important. Abhijit, on that front, the cross-border collaboration. I am not talking about the individual scientist or a group of scientists working, say, for example, I understand people like you, Abida, Anwar Zahid, and you are maybe working together. But a collaboration on a wider scale. Maybe a collaboration on an official level. So, for example, the kind of collaboration in climate change happening. Why can't we have something on that line? Why can't the countries like India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan having a South Asian task force on arsenic? Why can't we have it? Abhijit?
Well, yeah, very well taken point. And I suppose still so far, and both Anwar Bhai and Abida can vouch for me, mostly the transboundary work, whatever has happened, has been from the non-South Asian country initiatives. So mostly from researchers from the UK or USA, they have come through their own initiatives or some other international initiatives, and they have actually done those cross-border studies. People like maybe Anwar Bhai and me would be working just on a personal level, or Abida and me. There has not been, to my knowledge, any government-to-government, bigger chain of work that could have taken a transboundary approach. One of the reasons, and I don't know for sure if that is the original cause or not, water is possibly more sensitive than climate change on the ground. Climate change is something intangible as of yet. So we still have a lot of doubt, many of us, like what exactly is happening. Water is not. Water is something that affects on a day in, day out thing. And also water is a strategic resource for all of these countries. So there are transboundary water issues. You are yourself an expert on transboundary surface water issues, right? Transboundary groundwater issues are showing up in the South Asian perspective. They are already there in other parts of the country, of the world. In South Asia, transboundary groundwater issues are showing up. I know there has been, hypothesis that some parts of Bangladesh have got polluted because of arsenic-laden water flowing from West Bengal, groundwater. Now, whether that has happened or not, that's a scientific merit, but a political person can take all kind of advantage by saying this.
Abhijit,
and vice versa.
Is it, just sorry to interrupt you, is it actually that perception or a complete lack of awareness? Because say issues like climate change, everybody talking about air pollution, Delhi is stopped due to air pollution. But when it comes to arsenic or groundwater, which you can't see actually, so politicians don't see the environment in general. And when an issue like groundwater comes, which they can't see actually, they don't care. They care about the rivers. They care. When the Tista issue comes up, then Zahid Saab's Bangladesh and our India and West Bengal, we're talking about the Tista water or Ganges water. But when it comes to groundwater, which cannot be seen, they don't care. And the politicians don't care. My understanding as a journalist, I'm covering these issues for the last 20 years. My understanding, I have spoken to Pakistan's environment minister. I have spoken to Bangladesh environment minister. I keep on speaking to India's environment minister. My understanding is that they just don't care like the issues of groundwater or arsenic. They keep it as a local problem.
Yeah, it's somewhat true. Means they don't care because it's not visible, and also the effect shows up in 5 to 10 years, not immediately, just like COVID or diarrhea. So yeah, the problems are more fast rates than the political 5-year block, and also it's not visible. But the other reason of that is this picture of a contiguous extent of pollution is just coming up. People still so far, we have been talking about, armoring about it, but there was no data to demonstrate it. It is just in the last 2-3 years that we are now understanding that it's a contiguous problem all across South Asia and Southeast Asia. And it's one problem that is stemming out from the same origin.
Not fine. Let's very quickly go to first Zahid Saab and then Farooqi because we are running out of time. Zahid Saab, what about the regional collaboration at the government level? I'm not talking about the individual scientist level. The government level, why can't we have an arsenic task force at South Asian level? What's your take on that, Zahid Saab?
Actually, regional and sectoral collaboration is required. There is no doubt. because you know that in Bangladesh, currently we are abstracting about 32 cubic kilometer of groundwater, and 90% for agriculture irrigation and 10% for industrial and potable use. So see, agriculture has a big demand, and still now our irrigation tube wells are within the range of about 50 to 70 meter below ground surface. So we are abstracting shallow groundwater for agriculture irrigation. But if we start to abstract irrigation water from the deeper groundwater, then arsenic may move to the deep groundwater, from where we are abstracting our safe and fresh water for water supply.
Now, what's the think about the regional collaboration? Do you think that the government level it should be done, as you said?
Yeah, that's why, and you know that for the Bengal Basin, we consider it a single aquifer unit. So obviously regional collaboration is required to assess the resource as well as to allocate the water for different sectors for the sustainable use and management.
Let Abida's view on that. Abida, what do you think about regional collaboration at the South Asian level is required, or is it may be required? I think we all agree that it's required. The point is whether it's doable or not. What do you think, Farooqi, Abida?
Yes, I agree. We need some regional cooperation to solve this problem. We are working at the individual levels. We have cross-boundary studies with India, but I think the problem is, again, I agree with Abhijit, we have some political problems. That's the reason we are not going for the regional.
The geopolitics is taking over. I have been running out of my time. Last question, very quick response to expected from all of you. Let me start with Professor Fryar, and then I'll come along. Professor Fryar, what do you see? This arsenic issue is being hanging for last 30 years in South Asia, India and Bangladesh in particular. What do you see 10 years down the line? Because alternate water source and others being talked about, but not really being executed as a whole. Where do you see this arsenic issue 10 years down the line, Professor Fryar?
I think in the major aquifer basins in the Ganga and the Indus and the Brahmaputra, that we're going to realize that we cannot decouple the arsenic problem, water contamination and water supply, and so it's going to have to be addressed holistically. Okay.
Debapriya, what's your take on that?
I have to again mention you, Jayanta, that we all have to come together on this, to breaking our individual silos and come together to solve this problem. Otherwise, this problem will continue to stay as it is and will be sooner or later be ignored and pushed back due to other crises, like as you mentioned, climate change and etc. But the problem will still persist and keep on creeping to the villages of this whole area.
Absolutely. And when you are saying that out of 10,000 people being exposed, 6 can develop cancer, it's a huge figure. If you look at the 250 million figure, even the 15% of that be actually affected, Abhijit, it's a huge figure. So really, I think everybody has to come together.
It's a huge stress on the health system and the cost that the government has to incur to treat these people.
Absolutely. I think Anwar Zahid, the huge cost will be coming on the government if they don't act on time, and time may be running out for arsenic. What's your take on that? What is the situation 10 years down the line?
Actually, our government again started to think on arsenic problem, and the Department of Public Health Engineering formulated project. And what I think that now maybe we are focused on to supply fresh and safe drinking water, but monitoring and mobility or expansion of arsenic in groundwater is also important. If there is any expansion and mobility, that is also important. If we do not monitor that, in future we may face again bigger problem.
Okay. Abida, are you there? Abida. Can't see Abida. Abida, are you there? Let me go to Abhijit. Abhijit.
Can I make just last point to it? So, the India is moving toward the Jal Jeevan mission that by 2024, they are going to provide clean, sustainable drinking water to every household of the country, which is in line of the SDG 6, Sustainable Development.
Exactly. That's what I'm coming to. 2030 is your target.
Yeah. So if they have to do that, clean drinking water doesn't come from, nowhere. It comes from the groundwater mostly. So it is going to be a mandate to the government to find a solution for this clean water. And I suppose like the government is still kind of not sure like what exactly needs to be done. I had several discussions with many of the government authorities, and they are still not sure like how to tackle this issue in a regional scale versus a countrywide scale, and how to take it forward. So I think in the next 10 years, there might be less of a research on the cause of it, but more on how to treat it and how to make it available to the people.
Thank you. I think it's a fascinating discussion. I just only hope that we do not bolt after the thief is left. I think we are perhaps pushing it too much to the fringe. Arsenic problem has been hanging in the literally in the water for the last 30 years, 3 decades, and it's clearly that a lot of amount has been spent, India, Bangladesh, everywhere. But as being pointed out by very eminent panelists, that the planning has not been there the way it should have been. There had been ad hocism, not being planned in that way. 2-3 things coming out. I think I'll end up with that. Number one, I think the politicians and the political executives have to change their mindset about tackling arsenic. I do think they still don't take it as seriously as it should have been. Debapriya has mentioned the health implication, which is huge, and the cost will be huge. Second is the regional collaboration. I think the geopolitics in South Asia is a real problem. But in case of arsenic, we need something in the South Asian level task force where the experts like you should be part of it and try to find out a solution which pan South Asia, because a lot of issues being India, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, issues are the arsenic issues going from one country to another. I hope very, very kind of seriously that 10 years down the line, 10 maybe too far away, maybe 5 years down the line, our governments will understand and realize the issue, will try to figure out something together, as Dr. Fryar pointing out, and we'll keep and watch on this issue. As of now, today, with this, I'll complete here. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
While much of the world stays home, Canada's fertilizer industry keeps working to ensure the food we depend on grows better and stronger. Because without fertilizer, harvests would be cut in half. The nutrients in soil must be replenished for the next harvest. To recover from this crisis, the world depends on us. We secure tomorrow's food by fertilizing crops today. To keep things growing, you can count on us. To learn more, visit us at fertilizercanada.ca/COVID-19.